In the following videos, historian Jakob Borut focuses on the confiscation process in Germany. He will first present a general historical background to the topic, which will then be followed by an analysis of related documents found at the Regional Treasury Office in Berlin.
Just to give a short historical background on the confiscation of Jewish property in Germany and Austria, we should note that at the beginning, the German state, as a state, was hardly involved in the confiscation. It did encourage boycotts and even ran propaganda for it. But the confiscation itself was left to private individuals at the grassroots level. The reason for it is that the German state was not interested at its early stages in getting in trouble with the outside world, which they truly believed was run by the international Jewry. Another reason is that the Nazis came to power mainly because of the great unemployment at the end of the 1930s, and they did fear that the breaking down of Jewish businesses might increase the unemployment rather than decrease it. So confiscation at the first stages came from the grassroots level, mainly Nazi regional and local instances, and that confiscation grew with the years. The Nazi state, as a state, began to get involved in the confiscation at the end of 1937 and through 1938. The reason for it being Hitler's decision at the end of 1937 to enlarge Germany and take over land in the east, if necessary by war, and he did believe that a war was imminent. For that reason, he decided to take over, to take control of the German economy and harness it to Germany's war needs. For that, he took the Soviet institution of the 4 years plan and appointed Goering as the plenipotentiary for the 4 years plan in Germany. And when Goering and his associates tried to get over economical resources, they realized that they had Jewish property as a very easily accessible property which could be taken over for the German state and its uses. One of the first steps towards state confiscation was an order promulgated on April 26, 1938, which ordered the Jews to list their property, their valuables, and all property in the amount over 5,000 Reichsmark. There were special forms for it, and those forms are today were stored in the regional treasury offices in Germany called the Oberfinanzpräsident or Oberfinanzdirektorium. Those documents are stored today in the local land archives in special divisions called under the local institution with that name. Just like to add at that stage that once it became permissible for the state to confiscate a Jewish property, many other state instances became involved in that process. Therefore, when we're dealing with official documents relating to that confiscation, we have a whole plethora of documents of various state instances dealing with that matter. This is a typical document in which the Jews were obliged to list their property as it stood on April 27, 1938. Remember that the order was from April 26, 1938, and here we have a document of a Jewish merchant listing his property, and those documents give us very good information on the position of Jewish businesses, as most of the documents here relate to businesses rather to private property. And we see here that his business was actually in process of liquidation since October 1937. He did list his debts and exactly how much money he had and in which bank. The confiscation increased with the years and reached its fullest stage before the Jews were deported. Here, the Nazi state decided to take over all of what was left of Jewish property, and for that reason, an order was publicized in November 1941 as a preparation for the deportations, and that order stated simply that a Jew leaving the borders of Germany lost his German citizenship and all his property fell to the German Reich. Of course, they didn't mention it didn't matter how Jews left the borders, and in most cases they left the borders on a deportation train. Here we have an example of Vermögens Erklärung, a declaration of property which each Jew had to fill before his deportation. This is the first page of the declaration, listing basic information about the Jews. Here we have the declaration of Anna Sarah A., who was living in one room. The address is above, and we also know that she had to pay 42.50 Reichsmark as rent. The next pages of the declaration provide space for listing exactly the property of the Jews. And here we can see, by the way, that this Anna A. owned 2 ground parcels outside of Berlin. The question arises is why do a Jewess who owns ground parcels have to live in one room, one rented room? And the answer is simply that by the stage of persecution, all Jews were driven out of their homes and had to live together in homes which were called Jew houses, Judenhäuser, where they were allocated mostly one room in which they had to live. Here we have one Jewess, but it also amounted to all Jewish families having to live together in one room. This is another part, a very detailed part of the declaration, which simply lists rooms in typical houses with the whole set of furniture, and the Jew has to list exactly which type of furniture he owned in each room. The fourth room in which this woman lived was the bedroom. And here we have the furniture that she had, but we have also places for a living room, a dining room, a bath, a kitchen, and of course this Jew had. This Anna A. didn't have anything in the bathroom or the kitchen, simply because the bathroom and the kitchen were common to all Jews living in this house. And we also have a place to list what you have in the balcony, in the garden, in the cellar. Later you had to exactly list your linen, also your clothes. Here, by the way, we have the place for men's clothing. So she didn't list anything, but in the next page, where there was room for the women's clothing, she listed all her clothes. But I would like now to get back to the furniture that she did have and see what detail was required in filling this document. She had one night lamp, which she had to state, one mattress, and here we can see that actually the Germans, as thorough as they were, didn't list all types of furniture. She had a book closet which wasn't listed in the form, so she had to add it by hand. She also had one commode, one chest of drawers, and I would like you to remember the chest of drawers as we proceed later. This is the last page of the declaration. It has two parts. On the left, we see a statement, a signed statement, in which the one who filled the form had to state that he did so truthfully and wrote everything that he knew, and sign it. On the second page, as part of that declaration, we actually see a confiscation order prepared by the Berlin Gestapo. The Gestapo was the one legal instance allowed to confiscate property. So all confiscations were prepared by the Gestapo. And this order states that according to those that and that paragraph of that and that law, and we have a very long list of those, the property of Anna S.A. is confiscated for the good of the German Reich. By the way, when we look at this form, we see a legal problem because the confiscation was supposed to take place as the Jew was leaving the borders of the Reich. We can see that the declaration was filled in Berlin on August 9, 1942, while the order was actually filled in August 1st, 1942. So there is a legal problem here, but of course the Jew was in no position to make any contest of it. I can add that it was not only the only legal problem concerned with these types of confiscation orders. As we said, the order was to take place when the Jew left the border of the Reich. Actually, it turned out the Jews were deported to the Lodz ghetto or to Auschwitz, which were in Polish regions that were annexed to the German Reich. So they didn't technically leave the borders, but the Germans found technical ways to take care of this problem, and the confiscation mechanism ran as needed. Now we have other documents in this file that show us how the process went on. Here we have a form listing the property, and here we meet our old acquaintances, the book closet and the commode. Here we have also the property listed, 60 Reichsmark and 25 Reichsmark, adding up to 85 Reichsmark. Here we have another form filled for when these furniture pieces were given over to a merchant. We have the listing of the values. We have our 85 Reichsmark for those two pieces of furniture. We have a reduction of 30%, probably given to the merchant so he can make some profit of those furnitures, leading up to 59.50 Reichsmark. And next we have a form filled by a merchant with this name, where he paid the aforementioned 59.50 Reichsmark, and we have the date, 26th of October 1942, meaning about 2 months after the confiscation took place. So a very smooth process taking over. Sometimes not all the property was given to merchants. Here we have an example of another Jewess, Helena S. We have here another order by the Gestapo telling the Oberfinanzpräsident that this Jew had been deported and her property should be sold for the good of the Reich. The date here is December 1941. But we have here a selling of some pieces of property that took place in May 1944, meaning that this property probably was not wanted by any merchant, so it was sold to private people in 1944. We have the exact name of who bought it, who was, by the way, the wife of a police officer, and she bought 2 pillows and 1 quilt. Another man bought the other types of property of this Helena F. in March 1944. He bought 3 pillows and 3 glass pictures. One of them was broken. It states here. We also have here the value that he paid of 10 Reichsmark. So here we can see the whole process of the confiscation from the beginning to the final end when it went to private people. And we can learn it from the files located in this Oberfinanzpräsident depository in the archive.